Greetings everyone, welcome to Share Your Thoughts with Yesuba. Yeah, Kwesi Arthur, the shirtless lyrical genius, has set the internet once again on fire. This time it's not about his newly dropped project, but it's about the contractual disagreement between himself and the Ground Up record label owned by GLEN BOATENG.
Yeah, Samiko. Just that gospel church.
Kwesi Arthur is signed to the record label Ground Up, which is owned by GLEN BOATENG. In recent times, Kwesi Arthur put out a post asking the public to hold GLEN BOATENG and all other workers and members of the Ground Up record label responsible should anything happen to him.
I've been looking for myself, forget it couldn't make well.
It is quite obvious what record labels do with artists, but what we don't know often is the kind of percentages they agree on with the artist when they are signing contracts with them. Kwesi Arthur did not give us any detail whether he signed a 50-50, 60-40, 80-20 or a 90-10. We also do not know any detail that went into the contract, whether he was going to stay there forever, whether he was going to give 10, 5, 6 albums. We don't even know the clauses that are there. We can only conjecture or presume. But what we know for sure is that Kwesi Arthur is crying for help. Still on his post, Kwesi Arthur further alleged that his label boss GLEN BOATENG is asking him to pay a whopping $150,000 for using his own image. Wow. Interestingly, in the same post, Kwesi Arthur alleges that for the past 10 years, he has not made a dime out of any of the music they put out from the Ground Up label. So the question is, how true is this? So in snooping around for answers for you, what we found out was that an entertainment journalist recently interviewed GLEN BOATENG's lawyer. GLEN BOATENG is the record label boss or owner, and he is the one managing Kwesi Arthur. In that very interview, GLEN BOATENG's lawyer claimed that they had disbursed or paid a whopping sum of over £90,000 as royalties to Kwesi Arthur.
In that email, GLEN details payments that have been made to Kwesi, which Kwesi responded and never disputed. It says, to date, you have benefited from £91,370. £91,370 in royalty disbursements. A detailed breakdown of these disbursements has previously been provided. Despite these amounts, which have been lawfully allocated to you, you have solicited for and received an amount of $118,712 directly from Platoon without our prior consent, knowledge, or involvement. And this is the second issue that I was talking about since the GLEN part ways. So
it didn't end there. Kwesi Arthur went further to allege that he receives constant threats and manipulation from GLEN BOATENG, his record label boss. According to Kwesi Arthur again, Ground Up record label said they owned his image. They also owned his music and everything that is attached to it from 2016 up until today. And for that matter, anything he does in music, anything that has got to do with his image, his brand identity, is owned by Ground Up record label. Now, let's go into what GLEN BOATENG meant by image. First and foremost, when we talk about image in the music industry, it is not just, the pictures he takes or him standing there, the graphical representation of himself. When we talk about image, we are talking about his brand identity. We are talking about, how they were able to engineer, how they were able to cook the concepts that represent Kwesi Arthur, how much they have invested to plan who he is and how the public accepted him and what he looks like, So it is that representation that has gotten the consumers of his music to get attached to him, because the image of the artist always moves with the music. So when you see that shirtless guy, even if he's afar off and he's rapping, the first name that comes to mind will be Kwesi Arthur. The way his looks like, his mannerisms, and the way he will behave, and the way he carries himself about. So we are talking about brand positioning, we are talking about brand representation, they are talking about your brand identity, they are talking about the visual representation of you. So when I mention a name like Bob Marley, you know he did reggae music, you know he had locks, you know he plays the guitar. Now, when I talk about Michael Jackson, you know he moonwalks, he dresses in a certain way. So all these are concepts that are engineered by the record label to have an appeal for music consumers. So a lot goes into the conceptualization of the artist's image. They add A to B to bring out a particular representation that suits the lyrical content and the melodies of the artist. One of the things they do is that they produce his songs, they guide his lyrics, they guide the melodies. They are producers in the studio. They bring in, some bring in songwriters, some bring in, music composers and marketers. They move from one place to the other, promoting these artists. What Glen Boating, the boss of Ground Up record label, is trying to do is that he's trying to take back all the investments he made. And you see, we had this issue with one of our artists by name Peter and his manager. They also had the same issue where the manager was claiming that he invested in Peter. When I say Peter, you should know who. And then they even ended up at Nogukpo. But here, Glen Boating is not going to Nogukpo. Glen Boating is going strictly business. In all of this, one of the most interesting questions to ask is that, did Kwesi Arthur ever consider that this day will ever come? What was going on in his mind when he was signing a 15-year contract, when he knew he would not be able to fulfill? Did Glen Boating break any of the clauses in the contract? And why is Kwesi Arthur crying for help and asking the public to hold Glen and his team responsible should anything happen to him? Have they exchanged some form of threats? Have they warned him for some things? And why is Kwesi Arthur saying that he did not receive a dime? These questions and many more are what we are supposed to ask before we draw conclusions. One thing I know is that artists sometimes look at the camera, light, action part of music and they forget the business. But what record labels and record label managers do is that they look at the business side. It is high time, artists looked into contracts. They also try and take their contracts to contract lawyers who will look into it and help or guide them to, sign the best of deals. It's so absurd if artists will sign deals that they later find out that these deals do not benefit them, but only benefits the record labels or the managers that discovered them. It's not an easy, journey managing an artist, and it's also not an easy journey, honing your skills and then getting a niche, composing songs and all that. I pray that they find a common ground and then they agree to disagree and then they try to settle these, disagreements amicably.